So we are going to continue our conversation around boundaries because it's such a big topic and there's so much to say about it.
More
So
than we could have said in one episode.
yes, of course. And it'll probably have even more down the road. But today I wanted to focus on holding boundaries. Last time we talked more about creating the boundary, like around your value system and your self-care work to create boundaries for yourself. But then holding the boundary is a completely other topic and also challenging in its own right. So, for example, if you invite me to a party and I say, no, I'm exhausted, or I need to take a bubble bath, or whatever it is, I'm not going to be able to make it. And you get really disappointed and say, come on, I was really counting on you being there. I mean, how many times have all of us caved and said, all right, I'll go. And then you're not having a good time. You feel resentful towards that person who's probably a good friend, and other negative feelings too. So my point is, to hold a boundary means you are not taking on the other person's disappointment as your own. You're not kind of co-opting their feelings. You're keeping your container solid and strong so that you can feel compassion for them. And I can say, I'm really sorry. I know you're disappointed. I feel it, but this is what I need to do for myself. Because if you do get angry and resentful and cave, you're not going to have compassion for the other person. So I just wanted to also mention a study by Brené Brown, who is
Love her. Totally love her.
she's
Everything
brilliant.
she says is just spot on.
So she's done hundreds of studies in her career as a psychologist, and she did a study on many studies on compassion. And one of the things she found that I just find this absolutely fascinating is, of all the people she studied, the people who were capable of the most compassion, the most compassionate people all had one thing in common. You have any idea what that is?
They could hold their boundaries.
Yep. They have the strongest and most consistent boundaries.
Yeah.
That is the foundation of compassion, which is just so freaking brilliant. Because when I don't take on your feelings, when I don't embody your disappointment, I am capable of feeling compassion for you and towards you and expressing it instead of getting angry and passive aggressive and both parties being very disappointed.
Yeah. So there's so many things I want to hit on that that you bring up.
Okay.
And so with the Brené Brown, you know, in this study where she's talking about the people who have the most compassion are the ones who can hold their boundaries. I didn't read the study myself, but what immediately comes to mind is this idea behind when we create boundaries, that is the ultimate like self-compassion, right? Self-care thing that we can do, right? So in that sense of, we bring out and to the world sort of the energy that we cultivate within ourselves. And so if in thinking about boundaries, you're more thinking that it's not something that you're doing to hard line say, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that, right? And be in that mindset and that sort of energy of not enough, right? Or you know, and instead be coming from a place of, I'm creating these boundaries so that I can care for myself in the best way, so that I can choose like my health and what's most important to me, to keep me, feeling well. Right.
Mm.
And I think a lot gets lost many times when you think about boundaries, because I don't know that I always thought about those two things, right? Like I would be setting a boundary because let's say my boundary was I'm gonna, or we'll take your example. I don't want to go to this party. I'm not feeling well, you know. So you set that boundary. I'm not going to go to the party. And I wouldn't immediately jump to thinking I'm not going to the party and that's making me feel like I'm taking care of myself. I would jump to, I really don't want to go to the party, but I'm afraid of what that person is going to think. And it's probably not the best thing for me, but I'm going to go anyways, like, and get myself into that circle. And
Mhm.
now with more of this knowledge, stepping back and putting myself into the circle of what is really the most beneficial choice for me? What choice am I going to make here that is going to be the most sort of health affirming for me? And then,
Yeah.
like you were saying, bring that to the table of your friend, right? Like, I really would love to come here. I love your parties. I love being with you. But I just feel for me, I need to stay home, right? It's my health. And so when you bring it back down that way, that's really self-compassion for you. And even if your friend is disappointed, right,
Mhm.
you would you would hope that she understands. And most importantly, if she doesn't understand, that's her stuff.
Exactly. You are not taking on her disappointment and
Yes.
embodying it. I mean, it's so unhealthy to embody someone else's negativity. And
Yeah.
one other thing about this, so you in your head used to create like, oh, they're not going to like me, or they're not going to think I'm cool, or I'm disappointing them if I don't go. Well, you don't know how they feel, right? Like we create these stories before we
Hmm.
even respond. And not going there either is another act of self-compassion. Like, just take care of you, let them take care of them.
Right. And
And
then what would you say if someone said to you, because I've had people say this to me, well, that just sounds really selfish, Lauren, that you're just taking care of you,
yeah.
and this friend really wants you there and you're not being supportive, like that side of it, right? Because don't you get that side of it?
I mean, I don't get that very often. Maybe you have way more friends than I do.
No.
But if someone were to say that to me, I feel like that is the same response. Like, I see how disappointed you are, but I
Mhm.
need to do this for me. I feel like that's the only response you can give.
Yeah.
And
And then
it,
stay true to that within yourself, like knowing, right,
Mhm.
clearly that the reason you are not doing this, and this is a different example because this is something enjoyable that you would go to your friend's party, right? But just still knowing, staying true to that, to yourself, knowing that your reasons behind it is all about your own, self-care, right?
That's right. And if that person doesn't respect your choices, then maybe that's not the best person to be friends with. I mean,
Mhm.
that's more to the story, of course, but
And
we're
I also think
constantly.
too, in what I think is really important in conveying to whoever you are, like what your boundary is, to just really communicate clearly, right? So just
Yes.
be really clear that you're not coming, like stand in your ground, on your, into yourself, and be able to really clearly say, I am not going to be able to make it tonight. And the reasons I'm not going to be able to make it tonight are all about me and what I need. Just being really clear, is I think a really important part to help the other person in a sense kind of understand a little bit better on their own end. Not that you're even responsible for their understanding.
Oh, but to feel really strongly about a decision, you got to check in with your body, right? And
Yeah.
if your body is telling you 100%, I do not want to go, then that usually makes the decision a lot easier. And if
Yeah.
you're on the fence, yeah, that's harder to decide one way or the other. And then maybe the person would be able to penetrate your boundary around it. But when you know it feels right, it feels good, and you say to yourself, like, how does this decision make me feel?
Mm-hmm.
You can say that around every single decision
Yeah.
and check
And
in,
then
trust
I
your body.
I think also like sort of expanding out a little bit about even like what boundaries are sort of all about in a way. And I look at them as like a way for you yourself, like everybody has different sets, but as a way for you to kind of define what's acceptable and what's not acceptable for you. Do you
Yes.
know what I mean by that?
Yeah. I mean, I call that owning it. Like, there's some things that are very easy to own, right? It's
Right.
a value that you hold dear. You have no problem with it. It's the stuff that you're not 100% on, I think, that's
Hmm.
harder to own.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, and it's like also like, what are you willing, to tolerate in a sense, right? So as there's so many different layers of boundaries. And so this example of, going to a party and saying no, right? And to just sort of expand that out into being able to the ultimate, I want to use the word reason because no other word is coming to my head, but the ultimate sort of reason behind setting boundaries is about sort of the self-care and helping you, um, understand what is acceptable and not acceptable for you, helps you like sort of maintain healthy relationships, whether personal relationships, business relationships,
Mhm.
any relationship, right? So it's like this idea of, having boundaries so that you can, define more clearly what really is acceptable to you and what's not acceptable to you in a
That's
way
right.
that you identify limits and you take care of yourself because you're not allowing yourself either to step into some situation that you don't align with, or conversely allow someone to step into your space in a way
Mhm.
that's not healthy for you.
I always go to more dramatic examples,
Yeah, like what?
get really clear. So let's say you're someone who's in recovery and
Okay.
you're out with a friend and they want you to take a drink. You're like, I don't drink, period, end of statement. Like, there's no wiggle room in that boundary,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they can ask you a million times, come on, have a drink. And you're not gonna do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You might not want to be friends with that person anymore. And that's a byproduct of someone having a lot of problems with your boundary. But it's clear, it's crystal clear that
Mm-hmm.
that line will not be crossed.
Yeah.
And to, then you work your way back to the harder, more murky boundaries that are a little more fluid. But start with the very clear ones. Like, I'm not bungee jumping off of that bridge. Like,
Yeah, right.
nothing is going to make me do that.
Yeah.
And if that defines our friendship, then we're not going to be friends anymore. Right? Like,
Well, that's good. That's actually good to go to the extreme, right? To have an understanding, like I bring it back to what does that feel like in your body, right? To, how does it feel when you hold your boundary? Because so clearly that you're not jumping off that thing in the bungee jumping, or whatever it is you're doing, right? We can all imagine something that we would be like a hard no on, we're not
yeah.
doing that. And how does that feel like? How does that show up in your body so that we can like rely on that sort of somatic embodied sense of what it really feels like to hold that, because that's a really easy one to think of, right?
Yes.
And draw on that when they get a little bit more murky. So I
Mm.
love that extreme. That's really good.
that helps me a lot to create like a list of what my do's and don'ts are. So here's
Mhm.
another thing to think about. Now, I'm not saying I've achieved this, but I heard someone mention this in another podcast a couple of weeks ago. It was like, I don't want to have any shoulds in my life. I either
Mm.
want to do something or I don't want to do it.
Mhm.
No should category. I mean, I'm not
Interesting.
there, but I'd love
Yeah.
to be there someday. It's like,
Yeah.
you should do it. Do you want to, or do you not want to? And that's
Y-
another, like litmus test you can put towards doing things.
Yeah. That's hard, right? Because there's a lot of life where you're a little bit like, I don't
Yes.
know, so it's like almost like that clear. I wonder who can do that,
You know what? I've been trying to apply
trying.
it in the past couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And what I have found is that things become clear. Things that I think I should do, I actually end up wanting or not wanting to do. Like I can evolve the should into one or the other. Not all shoulds are I don't want to do.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think what's like an example. Like I'm thinking
Like going to hang out with, a family member who you normally are like, oh, I gotta. Then I'm like, do I actually want to do this? And I really think about it. And then if I want to, I go do it.
yeah.
If I
Well,
don't want
that's a step back, right? That's that. I feel like we have this whole thing that kind of weaves and comes back to, right? I think
button.
maybe it was our first podcast, I can't remember, but that idea, like what I'm hearing is take that pause, right?
Yeah.
So take the pause for that moment,
Mhm.
maybe a couple of deep breaths, and then ask yourself,
Mhm.
right? Do I want to do this or do I not want to do it? Like if it
Yeah.
isn't, if it's a should I, then yeah, like ask yourself, see what comes up, and then
Mhm.
move from there.
100%. And that becomes conscious living, right?
Yeah.
Like it seems exhausting at first, like, oh, I have to make a conscious choice about every single thing I do.
Yeah.
But yes, I think so. I think that is the ultimate goal. It is for me. Like every time I enter a room, I'm staying mindful. Every time I enter a conversation, I have a mindfulness around it and I make choices that are in line, aligned with my value system. Because how
Mm-hmm.
many times have you been like, oh, I like frantically showed up and I didn't act the way I wanted to act because I hadn't hit the pause button and given
Yeah.
myself time to prepare. Like it can transform relationships, it can transform experiences just by bringing that extra moment of breath and mindfulness to the experience.
Yeah. And asking those questions, which honestly brings us back to the boundary topic, because this is sort of one of the ultimate boundary things, like learning to say no, right? Like,
Mm.
so if you're asking yourself, should I do this or do I want to or not want to? And let's say the question is, I don't want to, and you still have that other, well, I really should. It's that learning to say no, to be able to like use that boundary of no, like I'm not going to do this, or no, I can't take this on right now. If we're talking about like extra work or you know,
Or
and
going
just
out,
having,
not going out, all those things
yeah,
that we feel
yeah. So
pressure to
it's
do.
the ultimate of like of that underlying learning to say no, that's stepping back and saying, do I want to do this or not? Right.
Some of the best advice I've ever gotten was to people like us who have trouble saying no,
Right.
or who have in the past said yes when we knew we wanted to say no, is to say, I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
Because then you're not responding and you're giving yourself permission to hit the pause button and do a little processing. Like if that could be your knee-jerk response to everything, let me get back to you. Even if you know it's a yes right away. Like
Yeah,
even
interesting.
then, like practice to make that your default response. Let me get back to you. You know,
Yeah.
even if it's in 10 minutes, right? It doesn't have to be in a week. Like, I'll get back to you soon. Just got to think about it.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
brilliant.
I like that. That's easy, that's easy to do because, I know this is something I work a lot on and have been working a lot on, which is good to know, right? Like none of this is black and white. It's all a process that we keep working on and will work on like forever, right?
Mhm.
But that kind of idea of saying no in particular, something comes up, like I know I'm really busy, I've got whatever going on, work, job, stuff at home. I know I'm really busy. And someone comes to me and asks me for something. And I know in my head that I don't know where I can place that in my schedule, right? Like I know that. I'm like, in my head, I'm saying, I have nowhere to in my schedule. And then my immediate want to response like is to say, okay, like let's figure out where I can fit you into my schedule, right? And so for me, it was like a lot of then unpacking. What is it like that? Why is it that I can't say no? Like to, really self-inquiry. I'm setting a boundary. I know I should be saying no. Like my boundary for the week is like, I'm completely full. I can't take anything on. And then someone calls me and I immediately like go into that. I just always want to help people. And I immediately go into that and I say, oh yeah. Right. And then exactly what you said. I get off the phone and I'm like, how did I do that? How am I going to do this? Now I'm like depleted of my energy. So it's a lot of unpacking of trying to understand. And I think this helps us stay more rooted in being able to say no. That unpacking of what is behind that, like the reasoning behind why you can't say no, even when you want to say no, or that you should say no, right?
Yeah.
Um,
So did you come to any conclusions? Sounds like.
well, it's so interesting because, first what come up is it's just in my nature to help people, right? Like the
Yes.
profession
Yes.
I've chosen, the way that I am, like I'm always giving out, to help people. And people will say that, like if people that know me, they'll like, oh, I can rely on you for this, that, right? So they know that. So then I
Mhm.
was like, it's a little bit more than that, right? Like what else is it? And for me, I think it boiled down to something more of a limiting belief of like, if I say no, they're not going to like me,
Yes.
right? Or like, they're not going to accept me anymore if I say no,
Mhm.
which is a really big thing, right? Like, and that's a common like belief that people have,
Sure.
right? And so that's been helpful for me to sort of say to myself, set this boundary that this week there's no more to do. Like that's literally my boundary for the week. No one else is coming in, and
Yeah.
then, or nothing else is coming on my schedule. And then when something comes up and when I want to go to say yes, even though I should be saying no, I
Mhm.
step back and I remind myself, saying no is in my own self-care, my own self-interest, and it has nothing to do with whether they're going to like me or not, right? And that to me is helpful.
Exactly. Right. I mean, I'm one of your patients. And if you said, no, I don't have time, I wouldn't stop liking you.
No, but
Say,
I would be like, I'm going to find time for Lauren anytime.
but that brings me to this other thing, that the more we all collectively work on saying no or holding boundaries, the more accepting we are of other people saying no to us, right? Like if you said, no, I can't fit you in this week, I'd be like, no problem. That's Barb taking care of herself, right? Because I know what it means to take care of myself and I see it in you.
Yes.
Right? It's the people that don't take care of themselves, they're going to give you pushback more so
Yeah.
than other people.
And such a good point, right? Like if the collective, being of, the world, right, is showing
Right.
up with this understanding that it's okay to take care of yourself, right? These boundaries are set. not to disappoint someone else or not be involved, but really to take care of that person, their own self. If we
Yes.
all knew more of that, and even when we find ourselves on the other side, I'm going to flip it, right? So let's say you were having the party and you asked me to come, and I was like, I can't make it, Lauren. Like allowing yourself to, and I'm not assuming you'd be disappointed that I wasn't coming, but just allowing yourself to also like notice your reaction to that. Like, can you actually be like, you know what, good for her, she's not coming, not because she doesn't like me or doesn't want to be with me, but because
Right.
she is recognizing the need to do something else for herself at that time, right? So
Right.
flipping it back is also that mirroring.
Totally. Like I do have a couple good friends who I talk about this stuff with a lot, including you. And as soon as the word self-care joins the conversation, I'm like, say no more. Like
Yeah.
that's the safe word. If this is part of your self-care, I'm done. I'm out.
Yes.
I get it.
And how can anyone like be upset if what you're communicating to them is the reason you're not participating or setting this boundary up is because you need to take care of yourself? Like, who
That
would ever
person,
be upset by that?
it's because that person hasn't self-explored. They
Yeah.
don't even probably know what their own self-care looks like, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, that's when we have to make decisions about our relationships.
Yep. Yep.
And, these are hard things. None of this work is easy. A lot of it is very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of, the concept of drop in, right?
Yes.
Drop in is feel your feelings, even
Mhm.
the yucky ones, like,
Yeah.
because all feelings are important and part of who you are. And when you drop in, it's not going to all be good.
No.
And if it sucks, you just do it, feel it.
Mhm.
Feeling,
And I love
feeling.
that you just said that too, because what was coming up to my in my mind is, as you're trying to do this, it's not easy, right? To set boundaries, to maintain boundaries, to take care of yourself first, like all of this stuff. We're not saying it's easy, but what is can be really helpful is seeking support. And that could show up in so many different ways. It could be listening to podcasts that remind you of this. Having a few friends, like you said, that you talk about this stuff with, right? So just creating this sort of little support system to help you within this container that we're building of self-care and setting up boundaries so that we are clear, right?
Yeah.
Have people around you or things that you listen to, and there's so much out there that remind you, right?
Mhm.
Why you're doing these things, why these things are important, right?
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
love that.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's conscious living. That
Yeah. I
is,
love that word,
mhm.
phrase. It's 2 words.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're setting up, you're creating the life that you want.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of mindfulness and practice. Like it just doesn't happen automatically.
No.
That is not a thing. Anyone who has a great life has put a lot of work into making it.
It's always work, and it's okay, right? Like you said, whatever shows up shows up. We take all emotions equally. One of the things I've been working with over the past few weeks is this idea of really, what do you desire? Like, what do you want? And I think that this,
Mhm.
in this context of boundaries, this talk, that's also like an important part of it, right? Like, can you begin to really understand and look at what it is that you really want, out of life, out of relationships, right?
Yes.
And then in that context of understanding that, how do you set up like the framework for that? Like, what boundaries do you need to set up in order to have, to achieve those things? Or
Yeah.
what support system do you need in order to get to that? But that whole idea of, living this life that you want is all about starting with, like, what is it that I desire? Like, what is it that my heart
Sure. What are
wants?
my wants? What are my
Yeah.
not wants?
Yeah. And so interesting to literally sit and have that little sort of self contemplation And in the context of this discussion that we're having, taking it to how do I, build that, right? Like if I want a more restful, energized being, and I
Yeah,
need to get more sleep, then I do have to set boundaries up around, I'm going to shut the phone off after 8 o'clock or whatever it is, right? It can be that simple. Boundaries can be
sure.
that simple, or they can be massive, right? Revolving around complicated relationships and whatnot.
Yes. I think all personality types can get to that place of
Mm-hmm.
getting quiet and
Mm-hmm.
listening to like that inner voice. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's easier for some than others.
Mm-hmm.
People have a facility to getting quiet and they get a lot out of it. And other people are like, no, don't leave me alone with my thoughts.
Exactly.
But those are the people that need to be with their thoughts even more.
I
Even
know. Meanwhile, our thoughts are always there. We really can't get away from them.
no, we can't. But a lot of people are good at distracting, and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
gets me on a tangent of like your self-care regime is a lot about not giving into distraction, because that
Yeah.
is the opposite of self-care, right? So
Mm-hmm.
whether it's drugs, alcohol, social media, I don't know. There's a million things we do to distract ourselves from
Mm-hmm.
what's actually going on.
Mm-hmm.
Watching TV, whatever it is. I'm not saying to never do those things, but getting conscious around how much time do you spend
Mm-hmm.
doing whatever it is, so you don't have to think about whatever feelings are arising in you.
Yeah.
I'm getting a little off topic here, but it's
Okay.
all
I know. We always do that. We weave, but you know what? That's life. It's weaving.
yeah, and it's all in the interest of self-care. And
Yeah.
it truly, truly is.
Yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
do feel like, we're all wise enough to know that something is not. I mean, how many times has a friend said to you, I know I shouldn't do this, but I'm doing it anyway. Like,
Yeah.
I know this is bad for me, but I don't care. Right. Like we've all said that.
Mm-hmm.
We've all had people say it to us. And you're like, okay.
Right.
Let's see how that goes. How's that working for you?
Yeah.
And hopefully we learn from those experiences. I mean, that's why we want to do this podcast, because we have
Mm-hmm.
learned from so much of our lives experiences, because we take the time to study ourselves
Yeah.
and try things out and practice. And then
Yeah.
we want to share it with our students and our clients and our podcast listeners.
Yeah. And I just think, sort of wrapping up a little bit, like a good sort of exercise in a sense
Mm,
to practice this, this week is that pause, right? So what you were alluding to before, and it's just like as um, situations come up, like just taking a moment to ask yourself, you know, do I actually want to do this or not? Is there another, if you say, no, I don't want to do this. I mean, sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do, but taking that pause to just saying, should I be doing this? Or do I want to do this? Or do I not want to do this? And just making the choice of what is best for you in that time of pause. It just gives your body that chance to just sort of set back a little bit, so that instead of reacting immediately, you're getting to respond and you're getting to make a choice. So much power in knowing that you get to choose, as opposed to just like this,
yes.
oh, well, I should be doing this, I'm going to do this, I should be doing that. Instead of like, wait a minute, I get a choice. This is my,
Right? It's very empowering. I
yeah.
mean,
So,
you can say to yourself, breathe. You can even say to yourself, drop in.
mm-hmm,
Or just give yourself a couple seconds before you react.
mm-hmm,
We don't want to react. We want to act.
mm-hmm,
Can't act unless it's mindful and conscious, right? That takes thought,
yeah,
right? Reaction is like a muscle knee-jerk response
mm-hmm,
that doesn't have thought attached to it necessarily.
yeah,
And we don't want to live from that default place of react.
yeah.
Wait, I lost your voice. Come back. Barb, I can't hear you. Did your mic, something with your mic?
Can you hear me now?
Okay, I can hear you now.
I know. Well, anyway, so yeah, I don't know how much you heard or didn't hear, but basically it's just that idea that we live in this world and this society that it is really a lot of knee jerking, right? It's just the world that we live in. There's a lot happening all of the time. And there's so many, things coming at us all at once. So it's like, can we begin to get into this practice of just taking that pause so that we can have more choice, right? And that we're not just being pulled through this, life experience because we're just reacting. So,
Yeah, I mean, the pause is the ultimate act of self-care.
yeah.
It really, truly is.
All
Awesome.
right, so I think that's probably a wrap up, right?
Yeah, it is.
At the very end, I lost my mic, but hopefully.
That's okay. Technical glitches happen all the time.
Always here at this house.
Well,
Anyways, all right, very good. So we'll see you on the
next
one.
time. Awesome. All right. Have a great day, great week.
Bye.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.